Hey, so good evening, everyone. Tonight, for this episode of In Between the Stream, we're going to be working on the Destroyer Hive. So let's have a look at what we have here. So this is what we worked on during the last stream session, and we worked on the cloud itself, but the flies are still to happen. And in all honesty, I was a little bit at lost with what it was that I was going to do with the flies themselves. So I decided to take a bit of a bravery test here, and I'm going for green colors on the fly. Why green? Because I know that green is going to match nicely here with the purple. So I've loaded some black, green, and yellow on the palette. More precisely, game color black for acrylic green, which I haven't used much, so this is going to be a first time experiment, and gold and yellow. Also on the palette, I've got some heavy body acrylic that we're going to be using when we reach the final highlight. So I'm going to start by doing a mix of black and green. I want that to be on the darker side of things. So a little bit of green, just enough that green is seen through. This is going to look a little bit like a dark angel green type of color. So kind of a sick dark green. Alright, so this is the color that I'm left with on my palette. Now on the camera you might not see it properly, but this actually is green, it's not black. You can see some green reflex there, even though it's not highly visible. Alright, so I'm going to switch to a layer brush, and I'm going to use that color as a base color for most of the flies. So pretty much everything that has wings on it, I'm going to paint the wing and the body with that color. And there's a hell of a lot of flies on this. I'm not going to do the whole destroyer hive on video here. However, I am going to do that piece here, just so we can get a general feeling for how it looks like. I'm going to start with the top, then I'm going to move at the bottom of it. I'm doing everything, wings, flies. Like, as a matter of fact, I would have preferred there be no fly in that cloud, because I would have much preferred do the full purple cloud. I think that would have looked better, but that's not how the mini is done, so we do have to deal with the flies. And I think green is going to be a very interesting color here. Now, as you have noticed during the last stream, I'm trying to go for color scheme that are less seen on that specific mini. Like, instead of doing like smoky cloud, I did the purple cloud, and instead of doing black flies, I'm doing green flies. I don't want to just do the same thing as everyone else is doing, because I want that specific type just to stand out. So green flies. I mean, let's face it, if you see cloud, purple cloud with green flies in it, doesn't look too comfortable. Looks pretty scary, right? And I think that that green was a good choice for a base color. I think this is going to be fairly interesting. Alright, so I'm starting to move towards the bottom of the cloud, because sadly for the painter, there are two sides to that cloud. So on the under part, I'm going to do just a green, because part of the flies is visible on both sides, but the cloud itself, the under part is not. So on the cloud I did not care much, but since the flies are moving through that cloud, I find they're kind of important to It's a color. I'm probably not going to highlight the under part of them. Okay, so this is going to be hard to see on the camera. I'm sorry for that. Doing my best to make this as fast as possible. Okay, getting there. Okay, so we've got a base color green on there, which I think looks pretty interesting. It still is wet. Going to wait a little bit for this to dry. And what I'm going to do in the meantime is that I'm going to mix another shade of that green. However, we're going to keep that one a lot greener than the first one. So I'm mixing this on the palette right now. In the meantime, our other color is actually drying. This is perfectly fine. Okay, I'm about to clean the brush. What's on the mini is mostly dry at the moment. Going to put both shades side by side. Okay, so this is how the next shade looks like. So it's much brighter, but it's not overly brighter. Okay, I'm diluting this. We're going to glaze these colors in. We're looking for a soft transition, or if not super soft, because these are flies, they're really small, so extra soft transition is going to be kind of hard to achieve here. But we're looking for at least some reflective aspect to it. And trying to not put that color on the full surface. I'm keeping some of the previous color in. There's not going to be like 10 coats of that thing. I'm trying to keep the darker color in while still bringing that brighter color on top of things. We'll basically see how this goes. Okay. So it starts to get brighter. Going to wash the brush, and we're coming back with another layer of that. So I'm damping the brush, always important. And the smaller flies, I'm not too careful, I'm just putting paint on them. And the smaller flies barely have any details anyway. So, not that we don't care, but you can be a lot more sloppy on them, and it's not going to show. Now that big fly here can be seen from below. We're going to give it some more color. But not much. Okay, so we're already brighter. Going to move to an even greener shade of green. There's only going to be barely any black in that shade now. Doing the mix on the palette. I'm sorry that you cannot see this. Okay, so right now there was a little bit too much black on there, so I added just a tiny bit of white to it to bring it back. So I'm left with kind of a dark mint green. It's actually a pretty interesting color. It's mint looking. So, paint on the brush. I've not added a whole bunch of water to it. It's already sitting on a wet palette. I'm still damping the brush because now I'm starting to look at more highlight type of things. I'm going to start be a lot more careful in how I'm applying paint, and in many areas it's actually going to look like dry brush, except that I'm not dry brushing. So the flies are starting to stand out, as that color is a lot brighter. Now we don't want the thing to be like super puppy yet. But it's going to get there. Alright. As you can see, I'm being rather sloppy with the paint, and that's perfectly fine. These are flies, they're moving. Like, their color should not be like ultra defined. And in the end, the only thing that actually matters is that they look good. Like, no matter how you're putting paint on them, no matter how sloppy you are with your brush, if it looks good, then mission accomplished, right? Okay, so the flies are starting to come out pretty strongly. Now I'm going to start going crazy, or a little bit crazy, with the highlights. So I'm going to mix, you know what, I'm going to go to the pure green just for a moment, and I'm not going to put a whole bunch on the mini, just a little bit. Now that green is extremely saturated. This will pop quite a bit. But allow yourself to stay sloppy on it. You don't want the application to be perfect. You want the thing to appear as a big mess, basically, right? So it's perfectly fine that the application is not perfect. Okay. Alright, so the flies are very green here. And now we're going to start steering this towards a lot more like brighter highlights. Now, a good way of highlighting green is with yellow. However, there's a very big trap that we need to avoid here. It's great to go to yellow, but if the yellow is too strong, this thing is going to look like an Easter egg. Because we've got purple, we've got green. If we go crazy yellow on it, it's going to look like an Easter egg. So this here is what happens when you mix Pro Acryl green with their yellow color. You get something that looks a little bit like necrotite green, but that is not necrotite green. And I'm going to use a larger brush, say Monument. I wanted to use number 1, but I don't see my number 1. Huh. Okay, it's there. I'm going to use Monument number 1 on this. Cleaning the brush before I use it. And that ultra bright color, we're going to try to be a lot more targeted with it. Not everything is going to get that treatment. And keep one important thing in mind. I have no idea if this color scheme is going to turn out nicely. I might currently be destroying the piece without knowing. But I mean, some color needs to be put on it. I'm going to try it. If it turns out nice, then great. I have a different typhus than what the rest of the world is doing. And otherwise, then Too bad, I need to start over again. But I'd say that right now I kind of like the look that this takes. But I am going to bring this to a much brighter color. That green is great, but it still is very dark in that cloud. And I find that from a color standpoint, it kinda is boring right now. So I'm going to take a risk. And on the wings, I'm going to mix a brighter version of the green that we've just used. So a lot more yellow to it than what we were using moments ago. Currently doing this on the palette. Okay, so this is like almost yellow. It's not quite yellow, but it's almost. Look at how bright and shiny that green comes out. And I am going to dilute it a little bit because I don't want that to come out too strong. So dilute with water and damping my brush, and we're going to hit the wings with that color, most of the wings. Now this is kind of glaze consistency, so at dry time it should dry somewhat transparent, which should make things a lot more interesting visually speaking, because right now it's pretty boring. We might have to do 2 or 3 coats of that thing. And this guy's wings are a little bit in a bad position for this. But should make things more interesting. Alright, so it's mostly dry. Going for a second pass of that thing. I'm just trying to get interesting color on that thing. Make it look good. I think this is starting to look pretty nice though. I might go one step further with the green on yellow. And you know what? Maybe it's going to look good even if I go full yellow on it. Who knows? Okay, so I'm going to add some yellow to that green mix that we're working with right now. Getting very, very close to full yellow. It's actually pretty interesting visually speaking. This is how flashy our green currently is. Going to add some water to it. Make sure that we have a somewhat easy out of it if we end up not enjoying the color. And we're starting to have something that's, at least visually speaking, pretty interesting. That was a little bit too much. The paint is very, very thin right now, and I lost control of it here. Alright. That cloud of fly is starting to be pretty damn cool, I'd say. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix now some green along with a lot of yellow to get to that similar shade that we're working on right now. That gives me a very bright green. Now for a final highlight type of approach, I'm going to add some heavy body green. Sorry, heavy body white. That mix. Make this a lot thicker. Currently doing this off cam here. It's going to be a very thick and very bright. This looks like very, very bright apple green type of color. And I'm going to take a much smaller brush. So this here is Monument 10-0. So we're really, really thick on paint here. Going to do the eyes for the flies. Going to do some of the tips of the wings, not all, just some of them. This here actually shows that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's actually cool to take some risks with your color. Like, we all know that flies are not green, but you know what? It turns out that green flies, in this case here, is actually interesting. Like, visually speaking, it's interesting. And it makes for something much different than what we're used to on Typhus. So for this reason only, I think that this is a pretty good idea. Is it going to be the best Typhus? No. Is it going to please everyone? Absolutely not. But it's going to be recognizable. Everybody who sees it is going to recognize it. And that's pretty cool. So that's what creativity in miniature painting is about. Do stuff that other people are not doing to make stuff different. And as far as I'm concerned, that cloud of fly right here is pretty cool. Alright, let's go on that small one here. A little bit here. That's one big fly. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to push that even a little bit more. Without going full yellow on it, I'm going to do a mix of yellow and heavy body white. And it's going to be used for highlights on these flies. Alright, so I'm going to mix this on the palette. A little bit of yellow. Oh, so my yellow is slightly tainted with green here, because there was green in it. But I'm putting a lot more white. So this is, yeah, this is mostly yellow. Or white, depending on how you want to look at that. Alright. So, it makes for a very interesting color. Do need to clean up the brush because heavy bodies are really bad for our miniature painting brush. Okay, going back at 10-0. And this here is how the current color looks on top of the previous one. So it's almost pure white, but it's not. And I'm going to go only to the very tips of wings with it, and top of eyes. I'm bringing color diversity on the mini. This is what I'm doing. I'm making the mini visually more interesting. This is almost yellow, keep that in mind. Need to clean the brush. Those heavy body paints are really hard on your brush. Have to be extremely careful when you're using them. It's starting to look the part. I'm pretty happy with it. Just a little bit on that bigger guy. Not much. I don't want him to stand out too much. Again, as I said earlier, as far as I'm concerned, there would not be any flies in there. But that's what we have to paint. So that's what I'm painting with. Alright. So this is where that process leads us. It's green that is very flashy. I'm hoping that it's going to mix in nicely and contrast nicely with the green that is on Typhus. And it makes for an interesting fly cloud. So, not going to do the whole thing here on camera, because I think that would probably be boring for most of you to watch. But that is a process for the fly cloud, and hopefully it's going to do something that's going to look nice. So I'm having issues with my computer mouse here. This is why I'm going to stop that video for many reasons. First, I don't want to do the whole thing on camera, and then I want to keep the final image kind of secret until it's done. So I'm not going to show the fully done fly cloud here. So I hope that you had a good time. Hope that you enjoyed that green build-up, because I honestly think that with that purple, it's very interesting. It strikes really nicely, and pretty soon you're going to be able to see the full thing. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.